Hey, thank you very much. Hey, Jen. Well, as playing cleanup batter, I will kind of cover a little bit of what hasn't already been well covered by everybody else, which is great, and a little bit of Shure specific stuff as well. My name's Ben. I'm with Shure Market Development. Nice to see some familiar faces out there. Anyway, let's take a look here. We talked a little bit about VHF. Obviously, the biggest disadvantage is the antenna length, of course, interference from other sources like microwave ovens and such. UHF is the sweet spot of wireless range. Of course, power and distance is great. Little battery life, antenna size, transmitter size overall, beachfront property and so forth. Good wave propagation characteristics, and of course most of our professional wireless microphones are using UHF at this time. This will continue for the foreseeable future. Let's see, 1.9 gigahertz, we talked briefly about DECT. DECT is a great technology. The main drawback about DECT is the latency, which is anywhere from 10 to 15 or 19 milliseconds. We see this mostly in speech applications, perhaps some videography applications where latency isn't a big deal. Anything with a real-time music IEM or something is obviously going to be a problem for the DECT latency. 2.4 gigahertz, it's very nice as a manufacturer because we can make one unit that works pretty much worldwide and don't have to go a bunch of different variants of frequency blocks. The main disadvantage is that everybody else is using it as well. So we have 2.4 gigahertz stuff with all kinds of video and baby monitors and garage door openers and cordless telephones and all that stuff. So it's pretty much the wild, wild west. Typically, most 2.4 gigahertz wireless systems on a good day get about 8 channels. On a bad day, none. So it's obviously not the ideal professional wireless microphone that we're using here. A little bit of some statistics about the big picture about why this is all happening. We talked briefly on it. Obviously, everybody's using more cell phone data, video, YouTube, everything is requiring more and more bandwidth. Everybody has a cell phone or two these days. It's pretty commonplace. So divvying up the spectrum and the FCC's kind of involvement in it is important for us to understand, as well as the telecom companies who are vying for this type of stuff. This is an actual map from T-Mobile, and this map shows what they hope to be up and running by November 1st. If you look briefly, it's a picture of mostly the rural areas where there are already open UHF slots where the move will be easy for them to just turn on their stuff and install it. They are working furious and very fast, but you do notice that over in the New York metro area, we don't see anything going on. That's because, of course, the two different waves of the repack have to occur first before we can move or light up new T-Mobile stuff. So it's going to take a little bit for us to get that. It'll happen eventually, but people firing up T-Mobile stuff right in the New York metro area right at this moment in time is not likely. Never say never, though. They do like to turn on things and install repeaters without warning, and there are some other instances of interference happening with cell phone repeaters and nodes being installed in installations in the metro area, which to be aware of. A lot of these little boxes will be installed in a venue for a special event, like an election or something, and there won't be a T-Mobile logo on it. It'll just be a little gray box, and they're putting out 22 watts, and you're wondering why you're having all kinds of problems and such. But not so much as the 600 repack stuff for T-Mobile. So that's kind of good news for us, I guess. Like Peter said, this won't be on the exam here, all the UHF and everything else. Most of us use a smartphone. We talked a little bit about the brief history of the repack, and I'm not going to beat this to death, of course. Originally, the white space devices back in 2009 when they first were coming out were designed to be auto-sensing. They were supposed to be able to detect a wireless microphone, and the ones that were proposed to the FCC as kind of like beta test versions and units of that either didn't detect a wireless microphone when there was one, or they said there was a wireless microphone on air when there wasn't. So they didn't work at all, and hence the kind of creation of this database. Well, if these things aren't reliable enough to do it themselves, then we actually have to have some kind of credit reporting bureau or frequency reporting bureau for all the stuff there. The actual bill that this was put in was called the Middle Class Tax Relief Bill, and they slipped this whole 600 megahertz stuff right in there. of course, my taxes didn't go down. I don't know about you, but yeah, that's was wedged right into that bill. They kind of put it towards the people as, oh, it's more spectrum for mobile. We were going to create a nationwide public safety network, which is true, kind of in a case of another natural disaster or a terrorist attack or something. And of course, put the remainder in Treasury, but again, still paying the same tax. The tactic was, incentive auction was voluntary at first. So as I understand it, most of the broadcasters were asked the question, do you want to give up your spectrum? Do you want to give up your 6 megahertz in your tower? And some of the big broadcasters, as you can expect, were saying, no way. I mean, we're still plenty of people listening to terrestrial over-the-air TV. It's too important for us. And then most of the smaller little broadcasters was like, well, you know, this transmitter has been in the family for generations, and we put most of our content on the tube anyway, on YouTube or streaming, so why not? It was kind of a mixed bag, if you will, and as the spectrum went over and over and the auctions went through their different phases.
There was some shocking, Howard and I were talking, NBC in New York, they decided to go off the air.
Cash out, yeah. It's interesting. So,
well,
yeah.
They did not go off the air. They're going to be sharing a channel with one of their subsidiaries and stay on the air.
Telemundo, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or Univision, right?
That's part of phase, what is it, phase 4?
Yeah, phase 4.
Right. So there was an option. You can go off the air, or you can share spectrum with somebody else or another station, absolutely. There was many different proposals. Every time a new auction proposal went down, there was different scenarios of how much bandwidth that we were going to lose. Obviously, we already know what's happened and where we're at right now. But it could have been as bad as proposal number 12 or number 2 at the top would have been the best for us as well. Obviously, we fell on proposal number 7 there, and that's kind of where the law of the land is laid after going back and forth. I'm not going to bore you to death with the details, but you know, at first the auction went out for $86 billion. They stopped. $23 billion came back as how much you know, they were willing to pay for it and such. This is $86 billion is what the broadcasters wanted to move, the ones that wanted to, and $23 billion is how much the T-Mobiles and the like were willing to pay. So obviously those numbers didn't match up. And it went for the second round, went to $54 billion a little bit, and they still only raised even less, $21 billion. And then stage 3, they finally got it here. So right around $20 billion at the end here. Let's see, right here we're showing the TV stations and the different blocks. We got the channel 37 radio astronomy band, the guard band, and the duplex gap, of course. Most wireless devices that are legacy aren't capable of tuning or across that. Our latest product, Axiom Digital, actually does FCC repack compliant, so it goes from 470 all the way up to 616 with a hole for the radio astronomy band. There's only one block in that range, so no matter which one you buy, it will work for the whole range. You don't have to worry about being legal or illegal in that case. We showed this, I think this is almost the same slide here. So what happened before and after, so I'm gonna skip through this. Same type of thing. Guard band about 3 megahertz and the duplex gap about 11. Of course, being licensed have very, as we mentioned before, have distinct advantages of being able to use this. And we talked briefly about it, but this slide's pretty cool because it shows you the actual hierarchy of who's in charge about licensing and so forth. So at the top of the pyramid here, the TV stations are paramount. They pretty much have, rule of that specific frequency range that they're licensed to use. Second under that would be licensed wireless microphones. So if you apply for that license and you get it, and houses of worship and sound companies and venues that routinely use more than 50 channels at a time, or actually have 50 channels, or producing content for that matter, will be able to use that. And then unlicensed wireless mics and TV band devices get the last of it. So we'll still be able to use unlicensed wireless microphones. TV band devices that are few and far between, as we talked about, also will, but they were kind of get the crumbs of whatever's left over, if you will. So we talked briefly about code channel operation. This is basically saying that if you're inside and you can use that frequency, even though there is a TV station broadcasting outside, that now it is legal to do so. Pretty much everybody used to do that anyway. Now we're just kind of a formality of being legal. Obviously, you're not going to run a ton of microphones outside on the sidewalk in Midtown Manhattan, but inside of a Broadway theater or Madison Square Garden, you're well shielded, so you can do this, and now you can do it legally. And we talked about this. Pretty much licensed versus unlicensed. The kind of the legacy licensees, broadcasters, educational TV, cable networks, TV and film production, right? All qualify. You're producing content, you're making that content. Now the FCC's opened it up to others, theaters, house of worship, convention centers, theme parks, educational and government locations as well. Yeah, so let's see, we talked a little bit about some of the licensing advantages. You can use more of the frequencies that aren't available to others, unlicensed. You can transmit up to 250 milliwatt or a quarter a watt, which is very ideal for a lot of field production, of course. And outside the TV band, the STL band most specifically, you'll have other opportunities in the expanded STL. So, what are we going to do about all this? Obviously, we talked a little bit about unlicensed bands, 900 and the 2.4 gig, okay, but I mean, there are a lot of challenges with that. Most specifically, anybody that has a consumer device can use this. 1920 to 1930, PCS band, or actually that's the DECT frequencies in the United States. DECT frequencies worldwide are a little bit wider. Back to VHF. Sure, other manufacturers are doing VHF microphones, and it's a reality. We are using that spectrum once again. That was kind of forgotten about for a while. There's some other stuff too. So 944 to 952, the STL band, we talked about expanded eligibility. Now you're 941 to 960 proposed with some holes in there, of course. The AvTrack, the 1.4 gigahertz. We are looking at technologies for that, mainly on kind of keeping track of flight testing and flight control and students learning how to fly and all that kind of thing. The AvTrack is in charge of making sure those communications are solid. Now, the idea going forward in the future, and the kind of the latest greatest technology, is that devices will query a database, ask for special permission to use their microphone at a certain time, place, location for a 24-hour period. And then they'll be able to unlock them and transmit. So your microphone body pack transmitter will pretty much have to phone home and say, hey, I want to use this at this GPS location at this time for this amount or whatever. And it'll ask permission, and then this will be firmware unlocked or whatever to transmit in that range. This is the wave of the future. There are many different theories on how this is all going to work. I think in my brain that you already have a GPS location device with communication to the internet. Perhaps this will Bluetooth or whatever connect to your phone with an app. You'd say I want to use it and unlock it, and then this will become unlocked for 24 hours and you'll be able to use it. As Howard was saying, it's got quite a lot of frequency there. It's like almost 100 megahertz worth of spectrum, and we could do quite a bit of frequencies in 100 megahertz. Even if you're only allowed to use 30 at a time, you can put a ton of frequencies in there. Our latest technology and digital technology, and in effect, I mean, in 6 megahertz on normal mode, I can put 17 wireless mics in there. On high density mode, I can put 47. So we are, reaping the benefits of having higher linearity of our transmitters and so forth, and better filtering, so we can operate more kind of stuff like that. 3.5 gigahertz, and then we talked a little about 7 gigahertz, ultra wideband. There's systems out there that can use this technology, spread spectrum and so forth. The main disadvantage of a higher wavelength frequency is that they're shorter, they don't have as much penetration, they don't go as far, they take a little bit more power to punch through walls and such. So perhaps 7 gigahertz won't be great for going through walls and roaming around behind structures and whatnot, but from me to a camera, maybe 7 gigahertz might be a viable technology in the future. That's something that is not to be overlooked. If you get the receiver and the transmitter pretty close to each other, then 7 gigahertz might actually work out pretty well. Kind of what's left over, what we're using now, VHF, UHF, 900, 1.9 DEC, 2.4, and then the STL band at the bottom, of course. So some of the current Shure solutions, we have VHF and ULXD and QLXD. Axient Digital, of course, will soon to follow. We are offering systems in the 900 megahertz, ULXD, QLXD. Our Microflex Wireless uses the DECT, or 1.9 gigahertz frequency range. We also have GLXD Advanced and 2.4 gigahertz. Our latest FCC repack compliant Axient Digital product here, which I have. I actually have it over if you want to take a look after on the bench over there. You can play around with it. And of course, we're always looking at the latest, greatest technologies and more to come. At this time, I think we also are offering a killer rebate program. We offer this in April of this year. It's running through April of next year. And based on what you trade in, and it doesn't have to be a Shure product, we'll give you money back, up to $500 a channel. So as long as that device you trade in is in the above 608 megahertz and transmits in there, we don't care IEM, wireless, whatever, we will honor that rebate. And based on what you purchase from Shure, up to $500 back. So that's running through April. I would encourage you to try to act sooner than later because, as we mentioned, it'll, as we get closer to people getting pushed out of it, there'll be a lot more people trying to buy gear, retune their gear, and so forth. I think that's about it. Any questions? Yeah.
Some specs on the Axient. What's the RF output power?
Okay, yeah, specs on Axient. Axient Digital has the RF output powers from 2 milliwatt up to 63 milliwatt. However, it's digital, and digital has a lower output power equals pretty much the same output power in an analog type of realm. 10 milliwatt on digital, which is a normal transmission power for us, is probably at least 30 or 50 on an analog carrier, and outperforms it in many situations.
Ben, I think it's worth talking about the brains and the back channel in Axient.
Sure. Yeah, we kind of some of what we learned from our Axient, or talk about the brains in the back channel here. What we learned on our Axient technology, we have a spectrum manager that basically sits there and scans everything all the time and scans your frequencies. It has backup frequencies for your transmitters, and if there is some problem or something, it will can push new frequencies to your transmitters via a 2.4 link. It's not Wi-Fi, it's actually a Zigbee type of communication, so it's a little different there. And we can do cool stuff like frequency switching if there's a problem. We also have some other cool little tricks, like where we do frequency diversity, where we can do 2 frequencies on 2 different carriers for the same or 2 body packs or 1 microphone. And if there's a problem with one of them, the receiver is smart enough to crossfade over to the good channel and such. So there are some kind of cool remote control things that we can do, even with a transmitter buried in a costume or on the hip, via that, what we call show link, and it's kind of a remote control back channel, if you will. I'm glad to demo it for you guys. So.
I have one more spectrum question. The channel 37, I heard rumors that they were going to open that up.
Channel 37 is where we talk to aliens, yeah. So probably not. No, I'm just kidding. No, Channel 37 is a radio astronomy band, and we do a lot of radio telemetry. It has been always, I think, for the foreseeable future, be off limits.
It's not only that, it's the medical telemetry band, and that's where heart monitors and other medical telemetry devices on patients use that band. So what you probably heard was that they did open it up for white space devices, but not for microphones.
It's very frustrating because it's great real estate, and if all of these smarts, are being asked for 1.4 gigs, surely they could open up TV37 for us. But
they refused it. It was proposed. We asked for it. Yeah.
One other thing about channel 37, I've seen some STAs for wireless mic use in channel 37 for sports.
Jim, what's an STA?
Special temporary authorization for a licensed user. Usually someone that's already licensed can then apply for what we call an STA. But I've seen people using channel 37, which is unusual. That's sort of a new thing. But I think because everyone's so hungry for spectrum, they're looking to places like Channel 37.
Cool. So high density applications with special permission, you can, yeah.
Assuming you have the equipment.
Excuse me, yeah, you have the special equipment that can yeah. With a license, you can pretty much get whatever you want, so. Cool. All right, thank you.